It's time for us to cover the lore of Fate Grand Order's 6th singularity, Camelot. Welcome back to Otaku Daikun. Dai here. Right off the bat, let me address some craziness. If you actually follow my videos, you'll know that I've already made the 8th part of this series covering Babylonia. I intended to skip Camelot in lieu of waiting for the animated films to use as footage. Of course, that was before the pandemic and said films were substantially delayed. Considering in the game we're already deep into the Lost Belts, I feel like waiting any longer will prove detrimental. So basically, if you're watching these vids in order, just know that while this is indeed part 7, it was technically made after part 8, and my channel's made some changes since then. Other than that, this will follow the same format as all the other singularities, giving you not just a summary of events, but a deeper dive into how they fit into the Type Moon universe. The general concept of the Grand Orders is relatively straightforward. The Mage King Solomon had a bunch of familiars called the Demon Gods that, after his death, took over his body as a demon god hive mind called Getia. In their own way, Getia aims to fix humanity's flaws and imperfections by traveling back in time to the origin of mankind. To do this, Getia needs fuel, and gets that fuel by incinerating all of human history. Basically, in order to fix us, Getia is willing to wipe us all out and start anew, which reasonably, we aren't okay with. To stop Getia and restore humanity, also called the Human Order, the Chaldea Security Organization has been sending its only master, Ritsuka Fujimaru, back into the past to restore the various distortions that allow history to be incinerated. By visiting these singularities and retrieving the Holy Grails Getia put in them, we can slowly peel back the effects of the incineration, as though it never happened. Thus far, we've successfully done this for Singularity X in Fuyuki, Orleans, Rome, Okeanos, London, and the United States of America. We've met with Getia, falling for their disguise as Solomon, and yet we adamantly continue to oppose him despite being seen as little more than insignificant pests. Our main source of confidence is in the optimism of our beloved Kohai, Mashu Kyrielide, and yet at the end of the American singularity, she began to bleed and passed out. Turns out that was pretty much inevitable. As Dr. Roman explains, Mashu's a designer baby, born through artificial insemination to have really dope magic circuits, kinda like a homunculus. As such, she shares the same flaw, that is, a limited lifespan. When Ritsuka first met Mashu, she was 16, but we're slowly encroaching on her 18th birthday, upon which she's guaranteed to expire. Despite this, Roman and Da Vinci want to respect Mashu's desire to fight for humanity till the end, which means it's time to venture to the 6th singularity. That said, it's far from normal. Normally, Getia drops both a Grail and Demon God Pillar into a singularity, which inherently cause history to deviate from its original course. For example, a version of France where Joan of Arc is resurrected in an angry form that seeks vengeance for her burning at the stake. In this case, the singularity occurs in the Holy Land of Jerusalem during the year 1273. This is the latter part of the Crusades, in which medieval Christians made attempts to reclaim Jerusalem from Islamic rule. More specifically, this is during the 9th Crusade, led by Prince Edward I of England. Historically, Edward's campaign was a failure, but the presence of Solomon's Grail allowed his expedition to successfully push into the Holy Land and slaughter its Muslim population. History diverged once more when the Crusaders wound up summoning the Pharaoh king Ozymandias. I'm sure a good many of you will better recognize him as Ramses II, the pharaoh who conflicted with the prophetic Moses in the story of Passover. In Fate, he is seen as a successful yet tyrannical king who actually grew up alongside Moses as a surrogate brother and dear friend. Ozymandias married his beautiful wife Nefertari and cared deeply for his people as a pharaoh of Egypt's 19th dynasty. Thus, while he denied Moses and the Hebrews their freedom, he honestly held no ill will towards his friend, even after the first of 10 plagues robbed him of his firstborn son. Their feud was inevitable, as Moses had rejected the Egyptian gods that more or less exemplify the pharaohs. Ozymandias, in particular, was seen as the child and incarnation of the sun god Ra, so while I'm not defending his behavior, it's important to realize that to a great many, he was a renowned and worshipped pharaoh. When summoned to Jerusalem, he took matters into his own hands, confiscating the Grail and using it to re-establish his kingdom of Egypt within the singularity, creating a stark contrast between the Egyptian desert to the west and the Holy Land to the east. To accompany him, he summoned yet another pharaoh, the supremely sexy Nitocris. Unlike Ozymandias, Nitocris was not a pharaoh for very long, and was remembered more for her death than her exploits as a ruler. Essentially, she grew up alongside many older brothers who were murdered by influential figures. They disrespected the divine status of the pharaoh for their own personal gain. Nitocris sought vengeance, as well as the desire to re-establish the pharaoh's dominance in society. For this, she invited her victims to a banquet, only to flood the hall with the Nile River's waters, drowning them all. With her revenge a success, Nitocris took her own life without preparing for a pharaoh's rebirth. Through legend, she became known as a pharaoh who could summon evil spirits of the underworld through her god-gifted mystic code, a large mirror of darkness. Despite very much being one of the pharaohs, Nitocris finds herself inadequate to Ozymandias and serves him as a subordinate. She guards Egypt's deserts, along with many intimidating Sphinx warriors. North of Jerusalem, hidden among the mountains, are various Muslim tribes under the protection of Hassan Saba. Historically, there existed the first assassins, the Hashashin, who carried out killings and espionage under their leader Hassan, also known as the Old Man of the Mountain. The Old Man was not merely one, but rather a series of warriors who came to inherit the title, each with their own deadly abilities known as Zabaniya. The first of them, King Hassan, was an ominous swordsman tasked with punishing other Hassans if they strayed from the proper path. When inactive, he can be found chilling in the holy shrine of Azrael in the mountains. He's not a heroic spirit yet, as the Hashashin still exist at the time of the singularity, but he is ultimately recorded into the throne of heroes as a grand assassin. You can find more about that in our next video covering Babylonia. The current living Hassan is known as Hassan of the Cursed Arm. Unlike the other Hassans, he was an ordinary man named Hanam who sacrificed his body to become part of the sect. He tricked the demon Shaitan, obtaining his cursed arm as his Zabaniya. Depending on your experience, you may be more familiar with him from the visual novel, during which he is summoned out of the body of Kojiro Sasaki to do the bidding of Zoken Mato. Turns out that only seeing him through this lens is a total disservice, as the guy himself just wants his people to be happy. Before leaving his life as a commoner, Hanam had a child with a woman named Salia, fathering a son named Rusht, both of whom are present in the singularity. With his face obscured by a skull-shaped mask, he serves not just his wife and child, but also his entire village as the current Hassan. The other mountain villages are looked after by various other Hassan, summoned as free servants by Getia's Grail. Two of them are significant. First is Hundred-Faced Hassan, whose multiple personality disorder manifested in a Zabaniya that allows them to exist as multiple independent bodies simultaneously. While this Hassan seems quite wicked in Fate Zero, we can't forget they were summoned by friggin' Kirei Kotomine. Of their own accord, Hundred-Faced Hassan also cares for their people as a village protector. The main body they inhabit happens to be a woman named Asako. Second, there is Hassan of Serenity, a young girl made to be both resistant to all poisons, while also being outwardly poisonous herself. She was a destructive weapon, able to kill those she touched, and while effective, this came at a cost. Oftentimes, to get close to her victims, Serenity would form bonds with them, sharing emotions and feelings that would inevitably end in betrayal. Her poison is like a curse, denying her a chance to love or embrace another without killing them. In addition to the Hassans, the mountain villages were also protected by another free servant, the Persian bowman Arash. As a warrior king, Arash did battle against the evil dragon Zahak and put an end to the 60-year war between Persia and Turan. To do so, he fired a shot, Stella, that derived power beyond human capacity. It traveled from the summit of Mount Damavand to a point between the two kingdoms. The arrow split the earth, serving as the new boundary between them. In exchange for this power, Arash lost his life, his body scattering in the wind. Altogether, that leaves us with a singularity containing Ozymandias' Egypt to the west, the ruins of Jerusalem to the east, and the Muslim settlements to the north. Yet, none of these are even the greatest disturbance present in the singularity. For that, we must talk about King Arthur. In Fate, Arthur is in fact a woman named Artoria Pendragon, who became Britain's king upon pulling Caliburn, the sword in the stone. Along with her many knights of the Round Table, Artoria ruled the land from Camelot, fending off invading forces like the Picts and Saxons. While noble and selfless, her reign came to an end through misunderstandings and betrayals. Unable to fully understand her knights, Artoria refused to pass judgment down upon Lancelot for his affair with Guinevere, and rejected her homunculus child Mordred. Thus, during her absence, her kingdom fell apart, allowing Mordred to start a rebellion that peaked at the Battle of Camlan. There, Artoria used her sword Excalibur to fight her child, only to have it knocked away. As backup, the king drew her sacred lance, Rongominiad, running Mordred through while also incurring her own fatal injury. This would be the place of her death, but her most loyal knight, Sir Betivere, escorted her from the blood-soaked Camlan into the forest, where she asked him to return Excalibur to the Lady of the Lake. Typically, Betivere reluctantly complies, allowing Artoria to die. This Artoria is the one we're most familiar with, the saber-class servant who made a deal with the Counterforce in order to pursue the Holy Grail. However, we have to remember that fate is a multiverse of various timelines. In some, she goes to Avalon and reunites with Shiro from Fate's Day Night, and in others, she continues to serve humanity as a Chaldean servant. In one of these many timelines, Betivere refused to return Excalibur, knowing full well it would give Artoria the peace of mind to die. Not wanting this, instead he kept it, and by the time he returned to Artoria, she had vanished, becoming a wandering ghost while still clutching Rongominyad. This had some side effects. For one, while Artoria possessed the spear during her time as king, it was not actually Rongominyad's true form. Rather, the lance is merely Rongominyad's shadow, a tool to control its authority. In truth, Rongominyad is actually a giant tower of light that exists at the edge of the world, pinning both the world of man and the reverse side of the world to the planet. It sustained the world's structure since the decline of the Age of Gods and contains a tremendous amount of power. Relying primarily on the lance turns its wielder into a more divine presence. When this happens to Artoria, the result is an artificial growth to her body, made more voluptuous and striking than had she aged past the drawing of Caliburn. Yes, that means the lance gives Lancer Artoria her big knockers. Beyond that, however, this particular Artoria, who clung to the lance beyond her death, transformed even further into a divine spirit, becoming a completely separate being known as Goddess Rongominyad. For 1,500 years, she wandered the Earth, traversing parallel worlds to ultimately wind up in the heart of our sixth singularity, calling herself the Lion King. At the same time, Betivere, feeling guilty for refusing his king's final request, held on to Excalibur and searched for her those 1,500 years, which is insane. Apparently, Excalibur shares the same power as Caliburn, which prevents its user from aging. Thus, Betivere remained his pretty self throughout the years, hoping to return Excalibur to his king. Before he could do this, however, he found himself devoid of strength, rendered immobile within the king's utopia of Avalon. There, he was found by Merlin. Of course, Merlin was the court mage of King Arthur, and after the end of her reign, he found himself trapped in a tower in Avalon. He helped us out during the American Singularity, but that was a temporary dream incarnation of his. When Betivere made his way to Avalon, Merlin restored him to good health and listened to his story about the transformed Artoria. It's important to note that Betivere lost his right arm during Artoria's reign and relied on a prosthetic for ceremonies. Thus, when Betivere expressed to Merlin a desire to keep on going, Merlin assisted in creating a new weapon that could serve as a functioning replacement. Using Excalibur, Merlin created a replica of a weapon known as Argitlam, the arm of the Celtic war god Nuada. While powerful, Argitlam derives its strength by feeding off of Betivere's soul, causing him to burn every time he uses it. It will inevitably kill him. Regardless, Betivere insisted on righting his wrong and followed the Lion King to our singularity. When the Lion King arrived in the singularity, she learned of Getia's incineration, and as a divine spirit who claims to love humans, she devised a plan called the Holy Selection. Instead of trying to fight Getia to resolve the singularities and undo the incineration, the Lion King decided the best course of action would be something more akin to Noah's Ark. She would gather people she deemed worthy into a single place, and absorb that place into the Rongominyad Tower, eternally preserving a select few survivors long after the rest of humanity is incinerated. This meant only allowing, say, 500 people out of the entire singularity to survive, and even then they'd be preserved more so than living. Needless to say, it's a controversial plan, and she knew it. Thus, when she used her divinity to summon her Knights of the Round Table as servants, she gave them a choice on whether or not to follow her. The summoned group consisted of all the knights besides Betivere, whom she had forgotten, and Galahad, who happens to be fused with Mashu. To these knights, one thing was clear. This Artoria was no longer the king of knights they served in life. They all knew her plan was cruel and extreme, that they would be killing thousands of innocent people to preserve a small few, and yet many had their reasons to follow her. Among them is Sir Lancelot, the knight who fell in love with the king's wife Guinevere. He still clings to his guilt and chooses to join the Lion King to make up for his past transgressions. Sir Tristan had abandoned Camelot, unable to endure Artoria's stern lack of emotions, going so far as to say the king does not understand the hearts of men. This sentiment lowered the knight's morale, making it all the easier for Mordred's rebellion to amass. Mordred herself, despite having been the one to kill Artoria, wanted to pursue a future in which she remained loyal to a fault and join the Lion King, fully accepting the judgment that befell her. She knew she would not be permitted into the lands for preservation, but pledged loyalty regardless. Then there is Gawain, the White Knight of the Round Table. Despite being held in high regard and remaining ever faithful, earning Excalibur's sister sword Excalibur Galatine, Gawain still felt that he failed Artoria for being unable to forgive Lancelot. To be fair, in order to rescue Guinevere, Lancelot had murdered Gawain's siblings, but during the Battle of Camelot, Lancelot tried to aid the king, and Gawain refused him. Thus, he blames himself for Artoria's death during that final battle. Following in her brother's stead, Gareth also joins the Lion King. Lastly, there is Sir Agravain who, despite not being a playable servant in FGO, is still important to the Singularity. While Artoria's sister Morgan Le Fay was most famously known for stealing the king's seed and birthing Mordred, she had other children with different husbands. Among them was Agravain, Mordred's half-brother, who was also raised as a tool to sabotage Artoria's reign. Thanks to his witch of a mother, Agravain hates women and was shocked to discover Artoria's true gender, but nonetheless decided to serve her, believing she would make the best king for Britain. While universally spiteful, he of course joins the Lion King, genuinely believing in her holy selection. Those that joined the Lion King did so because they felt they had failed Artoria in life and could make up for their misdeeds by staying loyal now, no matter how harsh the command. The other Knights of the Round Table declined to acknowledge the Lion King, and were given until sunset to make their final decision. Afterward, the knights who sided with the Lion King were granted gifts or special divine blessings before being ordered to slaughter their fellow knights. These gifts make them OP as fuck, so their enemies don't stand a chance. They then took to Jerusalem, reclaiming it from the Crusaders. During this fight, Gareth could not bear the guilt of killing her former comrades, and sacrificed herself so that Gawain could strike her and the enemy down together. With the Holy City occupied, the knights rebuilt the famed Camelot in its place. It served as the place where the righteous, lawfully good citizens would live until being absorbed into Rungominiad. From this capital, the knights defend the Lion King and suppress all forces that would dare oppose them. To keep her opponents in check, the Lion King uses the lance to cast holy judgment down from the skies, scarring the landscape with craters. Some of the knights, like Lancelot and Mordred, are tasked with exploring the Singularity in search of worthy humans to take back to Camelot. This goes on for about half a year as a sort of three-part war between the Muslim mountain tribes, Ozymandias and Egypt, and the surviving knights. Prior to Chaldea's arrival, Ozymandias was chilling in his temple when King Hassan attacked and lopped off his head. Thankfully, both the Grail and being in his own temple kept him alive as his neck slowly heals. Confined to the temple, Ozymandias refused to openly oppose the Lion King, instead relying on Nitocris' mirror to keep Rungominiad's light at bay. During this time, the land is traversed by two more free servants. First is Xuanzang Sanzang, the Buddhist monk known for traveling to India to retrieve sacred scriptures and bring them back to China. While she existed historically, much of her legend is embellished through the Chinese novel Journey to the West, which depicts her traveling with various fantastical disciples, including the Monkey King, Sun Wukong. After overcoming many hardships, her party successfully obtained the scriptures and returned them to the Tang dynasty. Xuanzang herself attained Buddha status. As a heroic spirit, she was summoned at a point mid-journey and decided to venture throughout the Singularity following Buddha's voice as guidance. Prior to this, Ritska got to meet her through the Journey to the West event, which was quite frankly a parody of the original novel. It's convoluted, but during this event, which functioned like another mini-singularity, Ritska served as one of Xuanzang's disciples. Anyway, in the main story, she made her way to Camelot and was welcomed into the city as a righteous person, and yet she left the city, believing the holy selection to be a mistake. Back outside, she met our final servant, Tawara Touta, and made him her disciple. In life, he was a warrior during the Heian period who slayed demons, including the immortal Tyra Masakado. He was most famous for being recruited by a dragon god to slay a gigantic centipede. Upon doing so, he was gifted a bag of rice that never ran out. Despite being a demon slayer, Touta is overwhelmingly optimistic and welcoming, which turned out to be perfect for Xuanzang. All of this happens before Chaldea finally sends Ritska, Mashu, and this time Da Vinci to the Singularity. They're expecting to arrive in Jerusalem, but are shocked to find themselves in the Egyptian desert, knowing nothing about Ozymandias nor the Lion King, complicating things to the extreme. Shortly after arrival, Ritska's party encounters hundred-faced Hassan, who has successfully captured Nitocris. To save a woman in trouble, we attack and drive her off, only to discover that we've rescued our sweet Choco Bunny. I say that, but her ears are actually modeled off the god Anubis. Nitocris wakes up and mistakes Chaldea for her captors, and forces us to fight a sphinx. During the fight, we're saved when Betivere arrives, referring to himself as Lucius to hide his true identity. As a witness, he convinces Nitocris that we actually saved her from captors, and as thanks, we are permitted to escort her back to Ozymandias' temple, Remisium Tentiris. Betivere heads off on his own, planning to sneak into Camelot and confront the Lion King. Naturally, he blames himself for how distorted Artoria has become, but unlike the other knights, he answers that guilt by trying to oppose her twisted ambitions. Ozymandias is surprisingly welcoming, after a fight to prove ourselves, that is. He goes easy on us, but that's mainly because his head still hasn't healed and is literally sliding off his shoulders. Defeated, he offers us a moment of respite, along with a feast, before kicking us out. He figures we'll be enemies when we meet next. He does have the Grail after all. Thing is though, this singularity's so messed up that simply retrieving the Grail won't be enough to resolve its distortion. To pull that off, we'll need to stop the Lion King, so we make Camelot our next destination. For quick travels, Da Vinci constructs a vehicle to traverse the desert sands, and along the way, we meet up with some Muslim refugees who hope to gain entry into Camelot, believing they'll be welcome. Of course, we know that's a crock of shit. Ritska's party covers up in cloaks and watches the holy selection take place at Camelot's main gate. Only 3 out of over 1,000 refugees are deemed pure enough to be welcomed inside. Literally everyone else is ordered to be slaughtered by the Lion King's enforcement knights, enraged clones that do her bidding. In command of this massacre is Sir Gawain, who derives unparalleled strength when basking in the sun's light. His gift from the Lion King allows the sun to always shine in his presence, day or night, so long as he remains outside. Turns out, among the refugees are Hanam's wife and child, Salia and Rusht. Between them, Salia is chosen to enter the city, but her son is denied. Of course, she can't simply abandon her child, and stands in the way of the enforcement knights to protect him. She is killed, and before they can finish off Rusht, Mashu makes it in time to shield him. We make our stand, trying to rescue as many of the refugees as possible, but stand no chance against Gawain's cheap-ass powers. Thankfully, Betivere is also hiding amongst the crowd, and encouraged by our bravery, steps in to save us yet again. He gives up his chance to infiltrate Camelot in order to help us escape to the mountains with the surviving refugees. Betivere's arm is the only weapon strong enough to fight against the knights in our current state, so we decide to try and recruit the mountain people to our cause. Before we can reach our destination, however, Lancelot and his knights track us down. Knowing we can't win, Da Vinci creates a diversion for us to escape, charging in with her vehicle and igniting her magic circuits to cause an explosion. Ritska, Mashu, and Dr. Roman refuse to believe this stunt killed her. It may seem naive, but luckily they're right. Lancelot, while serving the Lion King, does not do so blindly. While tasked with finding suitable people for the holy selection, Lancelot refuses to execute those unworthy. Instead, he secretly shelters them in a large encampment. When Da Vinci had charged him, he selflessly dove in to save her from her own explosion. Thus, while heavily injured, Da Vinci survives and recuperates at Lancelot's camp. Of course, we don't know that and continue on to the village. As one might expect, we aren't exactly welcomed by the villagers, especially not Hassan of the Cursed Arm. Despite testimony that we saved the refugees, we still have one of the knights among our ranks, and Mashu herself sure looks like a knight. Cursed Arm fights us, until Arash steps in and calms things down. After having a chance to talk, we earn Cursed Arm's trust, and we plan to unite with the other Hassans to form a rebellion. Sadly, at this point, 3 of the Hassans, Trembling Pipe, Intoxicated Smoke, and Peeling Shadow have already been killed by the knights. As if things couldn't get worse, we get word that another village to the west is being attacked by Mordred. We need to get there fast, and by far the quickest way is Arash Airlines. No joke, Arash gets our assault team to stand on a piece of roofing tied to one of his arrows. He's such a badass archer that his fired arrows are strong enough to launch the party high into the air, far enough to land next to the endangered village. This ain't exactly safe, however, and the party vows never to try the stunt again. Now, it's important to note that this Mordred is not the same Mordred we encountered in London. It's another instance of her being summoned, with completely different memories under a different context. Thus, while we know her, she sure as hell doesn't remember us. Much like Gawain, Mordred's gift lets her continuously spam her noble phantasm, Clarent Blood Arthur. To prevent the village from being decimated, Arash continually fires arrows at her joints, long enough for the rest of Mordred's force to be wiped out. Alone, Mordred retreats, minimizing casualties. Just like Cursed Arm, Hundred-Faced Hassan is reluctant to trust our group when we first meet her. After all, we did fight her in the desert to save Nitocris. Thus, in order to gain her trust, we have to prove ourselves, not by fighting her again, but rather by helping rescue Hassan of Serenity, who had been imprisoned in a Round Table's fortress. We oblige, and en route, we encounter Xuanzang, who is also headed to the same fortress in order to rescue Tawara Touta. Naturally, we team up to rescue both our allies. Hundred-faced Hassan uses her Zabaniya to distract the guards with her various incarnations, while the rest of us sneak in and venture through the dungeon. In its depths, we rescue Tawara, as well as Hassan of Serenity, who had been brutally tortured. Nonetheless, she managed to hold her tongue in the face of interrogation, but is so exhausted that she falls over onto Ritska, accidentally kissing them. Let's not forget Serenity is poisonous. Under normal circumstances, this would have ended Chaldea's quest right on the spot. Thankfully, however, as we learned in London, Ritska has a resistance to poison, likely due to protection from Mashu's shield. Thus, Ritska proves to be the only living human who can interact with Serenity without dying. Sir Agravain arrives at the fort while we're infiltrating it, but we escape thanks to Serenity's poisonous dance. We return to the village with more servants than before, and Tawara Touta makes use of his noble phantasm to provide the villagers with an unlimited supply of rice. While this is definitely worth rejoicing, we still stand no chance against the Lion King's forces. Among the villagers, only 7,000 are able to fight compared to Camelot's 10,000 soldiers. More importantly, so long as Gawain guards the gate, no amount of force will be enough. We're desperate, but there is one other option. King Hassan is still in the Shrine of Azrael, and it's possible he may help with our cause if we go to him. Sadly, this would come at a cost. Hassan of the Cursed Arm, the current leader of the Hashashin, would be declaring himself unfit to protect his people. In essence, he would be offering up his own head to gain King Hassan's cooperation. Only he knows this, however, but still agrees to the plan, thinking of the greater good. At the shrine, King Hassan tests the party, taking control of Serenity and forcing her to fight us. We win and Serenity is returned to normal, but in gaining King Hassan's trust, we learn that it will cost Cursed Arm his life. We protest, and King Hassan decides to postpone the execution until after he's helped us combat Gawain. He agrees to aid us, but not until after we fulfill his demand. We are asked to return to the Egyptian desert and enter the Atlas Institute, where we will learn of many secrets pertaining to the incineration. Seems reasonable enough. Now, I'm sure at least some of you are asking, what the hell is Atlas? If you want the most detail, you can check out my public lesson in Magecraft on the topic. But basically, Atlas is one of the 3 branches of the Mages Association. They're a group of ancient alchemists who conduct dangerous research in their underground academy in Egypt. In an effort to prevent the end of the world, they create many mystic codes thought to be too dangerous for actual use, and so they implement a policy whereby ideas and tools invented in Atlas cannot leave the facility. Within, Atlas has a gigantic supercomputer called Tri-Hermes, which may hold the key to understanding Solomon's true identity. It really is in our benefit to go there. Sadly, we arrive back at the Eastern Village to find it under attack by Tristan and Lancelot. Between them, Tristan is especially wicked, using the sonic power of his bowstrings to behead hundreds of victims at a time. Even worse, the Lion King uses Rongomeniad, not simply to intimidate the villagers, but to wipe the Western Village off the map. This is a warning, and the next shot will strike the Eastern Village, killing the party as well as all the evacuees. Confident in the lance's destructive light, Tristan and Lancelot flee the target area, but it's too late for the villagers to escape. Arash steps up to save us from this disaster, invoking his noble phantasm Stella in order to counter Rongomeniad's light. Just as in his legend, however, doing so takes its toll on his body, killing him in exchange for the power to protect the village. After taking time to mourn the dead, Cursed Arm has Ritska's party head to the Atlas Institute, while he and the other Hassans continue to gather their rebellion force. Back in the desert, we search for an entrance to Atlas, and find it swarmed by dangerous sphinxes. We wouldn't dare charge in recklessly, but are left with no choice when Lancelot tracks us down. For a moment, he has us surrounded, but Nitocris causes a distraction by projecting a gigantic version of herself across the desert, giving us the chance to rush into the Sphinx nest. Lancelot's army takes the brunt of this aggression, allowing the party to enter Atlas through a pitfall. Inside, Ritska's party encounters none other than Sherlock Holmes. While this is our first time meeting him in person, he secretly helped us out in London by organizing important documents for us to find beneath the clock tower. Right now, he's busy solving a mystery from Charles Babbage, but for the time being, he serves as our guide through Atlas. We make our way to Tri-Hermes, and discover secrets that, if you watched previous videos in this series, I'd already spoiled to make things less confusing. Namely, Marisbury's participation in the 2004 Holy Grail War, the Lion King's plan to preserve humans to protect them from incineration, and the identity of Mashu's heroic spirit, Galahad. In this singularity, while the Atlas Academy still exists, it's clearly been abandoned, and Tri-Hermes can only reveal so much before it runs out of energy. Still, for Chaldea, it was an important endeavor. The most pressing matter is that it was Galahad who had been summoned into Mashu all this time. He refused to cooperate at first, in protest of Chaldea's unethical practices, but ultimately entrusted Mashu with his power so that she could survive. It explains why Mashu feels resistance whenever fighting the other knights of the Round Table. It seems part of Galahad's personality can be found within her, and this becomes even more apparent now that Mashu herself is aware of it. With that, Mashu has some urgent business to attend to. After all, Sir Galahad was actually Lancelot's son, and the two didn't exactly have a wholesome relationship. Back at the surface, the party finds Lancelot waiting for them, and Mashu takes the chance to go give him a piece of her, or perhaps Galahad's, mind. Lancelot is scolded for being stupid enough to follow such a distorted king, to murder so many people for the sake of the holy selection. This lecture, more than anyone else's ever could, convinces Lancelot that the best way to repay his guilt is to correct the king's injustice rather than enforce it. Having already been a reluctant follower, Lancelot switches sides, joining Chaldea. Lancelot brings us to a secret camp where all the refugees have been protected, and the group finally reunites with Vinci, who is now strong enough to participate once more with her newly improved vehicle, the Bastinian. Now that we actually stand a chance against the Lion King, we feel we have enough leverage to ask for Ozymandias' cooperation, so we zip on over to his temple for a confrontation. Our boldness pleases him, and yet he says he will lend us his aid only if we can prove we have the resolve to save the world. For our trial, he uses the Grail to temporarily turn himself into the demon god pillar Amun, but because he's a boss, he upgrades himself even further by taking the name of Amun-Ra. Basically, he makes us fight an actual god, and once we kick his ass, he fights us in person alongside Nitocris. He's a stubborn one, alright, but ultimately he agrees to help. Sadly, he himself can't exactly leave the temple, so instead he offers up his army of sphinxes. In addition, he casually tosses us the Grail, but we all know that alone won't resolve the singularity. Having fulfilled King Hassan's request, and earning Ozymandias' help, it's time for our assault on Camelot. We reunite with the Mountain Saracens who have managed to gather 17,000 followers. Not bad. Us saving the refugees built up some solid morale. Our battle plan is simple. The Sphinxes will attack Camelot from the rear, drawing away some of the guard while Lancelot marches our army straight at the front gate, hoping to God that King Hassan holds up his end of the bargain and duels Gawain. Thankfully, he meets our demands and then some. Camelot, expecting our arrival, mounts enough archers atop the walls to whittle down 40% of our forces. That plan is foiled when King Hassan shows up, conjuring a massive sandstorm that not only hinders the archers, but also blocks out the sun, robbing Gawain of his gift. While Gawain fights good old Gramps, we battle our way to Camelot's main gate. But realize there's one problem. One does not simply walk into Camelot. The gate only opens for those deemed worthy of holy selection. If only we had an ally the gate recognized. Oh wait, we do. Big Titty Monk comes to the rescue, unleashing her noble phantasm, 5 Elements Mountain, Shaka Nyorai Palm, to blast a gaping hole in the gate. Similar to Arash, however, using its full might costs her life, but she deems it a worthy sacrifice to resolve the singularity. Finally, Ritska's party makes it into the Holy City, only to discover that the Lion King has begun activating the tower at the world's edge, bathing the main castle in an impenetrable golden light. Unable to enter beyond the light, we instead battle against Mordred and finish her off. Still, we need to break through that barrier, and Ozymandias has just the thing. Believing that the Lion King cannot fire off beams of light while the barrier is in place, he channels the energy of his temple to try and shatter it. His assumption is wrong, however. The Lion King prepares her long-distance counterattack, and to protect Ozymandias, Nitocris deploys Anpu Nebta Jaser to block. Using this opportunity, Ozzy literally elevates his temple and crashes it into the Golden Tower, shattering the barrier. To accomplish this amazing yet ridiculous feat, the two pharaohs use up all their energy and disappear, leaving the future of humanity in Ritska's hands. Too bad Tristan tries to block our path. Cursed Arm, Hundred-Faced, and Hassan of Serenity take him on, allowing us to enter the castle. They aim to poison the son of a bitch with Serenity's Dance, but his gift from the Lion King is essentially Uno's reverse card. He's all like, no you, rendering the poison ineffective. As a final attempt to kill Tristan, Cursed Arm grabs him with Shaitan's arm and releases its curse. The demon eats away at Tristan such that, even after breaking free, he cannot recover from the damage. King Hassan, despite distracting Gawain, does not kill him. Thus, Gawain routs us within the castle for a final showdown. At the same time, Lancelot duels Agravain to the death and loses, but not without leaving behind some fatal wounds. We defeat Gawain and enter the throne room, at last getting the chance to speak to the Lion King in person. After all this time, Artoria had forgotten her most loyal knight. Betivere, after searching for 1500 years, reunites with his king and vows to return Excalibur. First, however, we need to incapacitate the Holy Lance. During a climactic battle, Betivere pushes himself and his arm past the point of no return, and to defend us, Mashu invokes the true name of her noble phantasm, Lord Camelot, the stern resolve of the knights, literally invoked by her shield made from the Round Table itself. Betivere calms Mashu, teaching her to use it properly, which not only saves everyone, but also rekindles the Lion King's distant past. She recognizes Betivere, and now that Rungominiad lacks the energy to manifest the tower at the ends of the world, she concedes and accepts Excalibur. Betivere, in this roundabout way, fulfills his king's last order and dies. The Lion King herself declares that while she has been defeated, she does not regret her actions. At the very least, she's learned that, beyond the seventh singularity, their ultimate foe, Solomon, aka Getia, resides in a temple outside the flow of space and time. Thus, after resolving just one more singularity, we'll have to venture to this hidden locale. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. For now we rejoice, as the sixth singularity is restored. While Ritska, Mashu, and Vinci are sent back to Chaldea, the remaining servants disappear, and King Hassan confronts Cursed Arm once more. Because Cursed Arm relinquished his Zabaniya at the very end, Grams doesn't find it necessary to kill him, since technically he's no longer a Hassan. Back at Chaldea, Ritska and Mashu are eager to head to their next destination, Babylonia, but it's going to take Dr. Roman some time to make the calculations necessary to ray shift so far back in time. Even though the Betivere we met is no more, Betivere as a heroic spirit becomes summonable by Chaldea. Roman speculates it must have been the Lion King's doing. Either way, it's nifty. And with that, we've covered the entire lore of the Camelot singularity. As I explained at the start, y'all are able to jump from this straight into the lore of Babylonia, which thankfully was fully animated. It's one of my favorite videos, so please enjoy. Thanks for watching. If you enjoy this channel, help me beat the algorithm by liking, commenting, and sharing the video, subscribing to Otaku Daikun, and, most of all, smashing that notification bell so you don't miss out on all of my anime discussion, lore, or Let's Play content. If you want to support me directly, there are now 3 ways that all provide the same benefits. You can click join here on YouTube, or join Patreon or Subscribestar for access to exclusive vids and early access. As always, celebrate your fandom.